All right, now that we've got some of the layout issues taken care of, at least with our navigation bars, we've still got some work to do with the main element, but we'll do that in a minute. Let's go ahead and start worrying about some of the aesthetics. So I have a section for my header and footer navigation, and then I also have the section down here for footer. So what I really probably ought to do, just to be more consistent, is make this a layout section. So just add header and footer navigation layout. And then just above main here, I might want to add another for header. And again, select my text, Command or Control / to comment it out. That way it's just consistent that my aesthetic styles for the header or the footer will go here. And then some of the layout styles will be in the navigation area there. Okay, so now my next instruction is to give my navigation bar a background color other than black or white, and to give the text of those navigation links a good contrasting color. One thing I'm going to recommend you check out is to go to a website called Coolors, COOLORS.io. And I think I typed it wrong. I always type it wrong. Let me try it again. I'm just going to Google Coolors color picker. There we go, coolors.co. I always get that website wrong, but this would be a really good one for you to bookmark because it helps you to generate color palettes in a way that is just a little bit more accessible. Let's see. All right. So I'm going to start the generator, and I'm going to use this just to generate a color palette for me. So the way that this works is it's free to use, and it gives you a tutorial, but basically what you can do is I think you hit the space bar to regenerate, and let's keep going until we find at least one color that we like. Let's see. All right. I'm not crazy about all of these, but I'm kind of liking these two colors here. So I'm going to go ahead and lock those in by choosing my lock icon. And I'm going to keep hitting the space bar to randomize the others until I start to find some that I like that go with these. Right, I think we'll go with this dark purple as one. And this electric blue is kind of interesting. I'm not sure about this violet color. Oh, we'll go here for now. Okay, we don't have to keep it, but what this is giving us is some hex values that we can use. And so what I'm going to do is actually make my navigation bar this dark purple color. And I'm just going to copy the hex value for that. Hexadecimal is the general value used for colors in web. There are other color models as well, but hexadecimal is one of them. And basically it's 6 letters or numbers that create the value for the color. And in this case, it's this 201335. It's not always numbers, but in this case it is. And I'm going to come back here and I'm going to give my header that background color by opening up a header selector. And then I'm going to declare, okay, I really do need to get my vocabulary right for you guys here. So these are the selectors, right? These are properties, and these are values, and then the whole thing is a declaration. So just so we're being clear. So now I'm going to continue by giving this a background property, and then I'm going to give it the value of that color. And now we can see that my navbar has turned that dark purple color, but unfortunately so has this because there's more than one header. There's an article in our style guide text, and articles can have headers too, and we don't want it to have this background color. So this is a case where I'm not quite specific enough, but there is a pseudo selector that I can use for this, and that is a colon and has, word has, and then nav in there. So what this is saying is a header element that has a nav bar in it, turn it purple. And so it's kind of an elegant way to fix that issue that we were having. Now obviously our link text color here is kind of terrible now. So the other thing that we want to do over the background color here, we want to also use the color property, which is the text color. And let's go back to our color palette and find a light color that we could use for that. I think these are going to be just a little bit too jarring to look at. So usually if you go super dark, you want to go super light for the rest. I think I'm going to try this blue, and we'll see how it goes. Let me just try that out. And the problem is I'm doing it on the header, and the anchor elements are the ones that have that color, so I put it in the wrong place. So what I need to do now is do header. I could still come back to nav ULLIA and do a color. And now, so your question might be, do I need to create a whole new selector for this? And I don't. If I have one up here that is header nav ULLIA, I could put it in that one. That's okay. It's a little bit muted. So what I might want to do is come back here, and within this palette, I can also view shades. I might want to go a couple shades lighter for that. Maybe right around here. Now the problem is once I do that, it gets rid of my initial color, so I might want to build out a palette of hex values and RGB values that I could use. What I'm going to do for now is just change it to that, and that looks a lot better. It's a little bit more legible. I'm not sure that I'm crazy about that color combination, but again, I told you don't get too married to this. What we really want to do is just get this laid out, and then we can go back in and fine tune because it costs us nothing to change this hex value later. So before I lose this, I'm going to do a quick save as and just overwrite my style sheet. And I'm going to keep going. So the next bit of information that I was given was to style this one button to be kind of the opposite of that, to where my navigation bar gets a background color other than black or white, and the link text gets a good contrasting color. And then I'm going to use the class name that I gave this button to style it to be the opposite background and text color. So it's going to have this light blue color for the background and dark blue for the text. And in order to do that, I'm just going to select its selector that we gave it in the last exercise. So if I come back to the elements and I come and I find this button, I can see that it has a class of BTN. So I can call out that class of BTN to select this and to change its layout. So I'm going to continue doing that in header for now. But because it has a class, and we've talked about CSS and specificity, a class overrides any type selector. So I don't actually have to drill down with all of these. I can actually just call out the class of .btn. Dot means class. So in my HTML, class equals, and then just the name is calling out what I need. We don't put the dot in the HTML. But as a shorthand for class, in our CSS, we put a dot and the name of the class. So I've called out .btn. And I just need to do the opposite for that. So I'm still going to use this background selector, or this background property, and I'm going to take this light color and place that in that background property. And you see that's changed my button here to the light blue color. And then I can use the color property and give it the dark blue color. And so now this is what the instructions were telling me to do. Now, one thing I want you to notice, though, is that I'm having to repeat myself a fair amount. And there is a concept in web design and coding in general, or programming in general, that is given the acronym of DRY for don't repeat yourself. Anytime you find yourself having to type the same thing over and over again, you're probably working too hard. So what we can do is actually, if we determine, and I'm going to wait for a minute, I'll do a separate video on doing it, but if we determine that one of these needs to be the primary color of our brand, and if we determine that one of these needs to be the secondary color of our brand, then we can actually store these in variables, and we can call them based on the name of the variable instead of having to type this over and over again. I'll do a video that shows you the benefit of that later, though. For now, we'll keep going with these hex values. All right, with all this done, we can actually go on and do a little bit to the footer. And as far as the assignment instructions, we've actually done most of what we are told to do for it. We've removed the bullets, we've centered the links, they're evenly distributed across the page, they're horizontal. We got rid of the underlining of the text, although there never was any because we've been using icons. So far we're doing really well, and our footer's really almost done. The last bit of instructions that we need to handle are giving the navigation bar a background color of white, which it already has, and then giving the link text the color of black when it's at rest. So all we need to do is move into the footer here and choose footer nav ULLIA, and we may have called that out earlier. It's a good idea to pay attention to that, and we did up here. So, and that was a positioning thing. This is a color thing. Still, I'm not going to write a second selector for that. I'm going to use the one that's up there. And I'm just going to add the property of color black. So now all of my links down here are black at rest. And after that, we can do a whole separate video just on link states to make these links more interactive. So let's move on real quick to the main element, because the main element doesn't need that much, and then we'll do a video about link states, and then we'll talk about typography, and we'll be done. So for our main element, you may be noticing, and it's probably bothering you, hopefully it is as designers, that the content is just straight up against the edge of the page here. We don't want that. So we want to center that content on the page. The way that we're going to do that is by giving the main element some properties. So I'm going to come and find where my main element section is. Right now it's empty. And I'm actually going to style the type selector of main. And I'm going to give it a couple of different values. First, I'm going to give it margins. I'm going to use the margin selector. And the way these selectors work is really flexible. So I can just give one value that would affect all four sides, or I could change my property to margin dash left or margin dash right. Or I can declare all four values by moving clockwise from top to right to bottom to left. And if my top and bottom are going to be the same, and my left and right are going to be the same, I can declare that on the same selector here with two values. So in this case, what I want to do is have my top and bottom margins for the main element here be 0. And then I want my left and right to be auto, A-U-T-O, automatic. And what that's going to do is it's going to center the content on the page. We can't see it yet, though, because right now the main element's taking up 100% of the width. So what I also need to do is give it an additional property of max width 960. And this could be any number, but 960 is a pretty common one within the web space. And so now if I right now we still don't see anything because the page is more narrow than 960. But if I come and I move this and dock it to the bottom, what we'll see is that the text here is now centered on the page. And what I can do to make this even clearer is I can come back to my sources tab and I can give main a background color of white. There are some named colors, by the way, so I could actually just type the word white here. And then to be able to see it, what I really need to do is to give the body a different background color, so something other than white. So I'm going to come here to my HTML body selector, and I'm going to type in background. And I'm going to come back to my color palette that I was working with, and I'm going to choose this kind of beige color here. And so now we can see what's happening a little bit better. Now, of course, this also, it solved a problem, but it created some additional problems. So one of the problems that we're seeing is how there's this space around. That is probably a margin on either the bottom of the nav bar here or the header, or more likely all the way around the main element. So we can find that out by using our DevTools, selecting the main element, and I can see that the main element has the margins that I gave it, and something else is pushing it down. So let's take a look and see if we can figure out what that is. And look, it's actually this H1 inside of the main element, having this margin across the top, and that's pushing everything down. So what we could do, we could probably fix it by giving the main element padding that's at least equivalent to the margin of the H1. So the H1 has a margin of around, I don't know, 21 pixels. Let's see. It's getting 16 pixels and then 2em. So that's probably around what, 32 pixels, twice the 16 there. So let's try giving the main element padding and see if that solves both problems, because that'll push the content off the edges here too. Let's see. So we want to use padding to push everything inside of it. I'm not going to use ems, I'm going to use rems. I'm going to type 2rem. And the difference between ems and rems is that rems are easier to use, long story short. Ems are relative to their parent container, and so the numbers are harder to gauge. But rems all come back to this base of 16 pixels here. So if we use rems and I say 2rems, that means this value times 2. All right, so we're going to use rems for a lot of our styling because that's going to give us a proportion that we can stick to, and it's just going to make things easier once we start talking about responsive web design. But what we can see now is that just adding the padding there has really helped a lot. We still have some things we're probably going to want to fix presentation-wise, but we're in a lot better shape for having done that. So our main element's looking pretty good now. There's still some things we could fix, but let's go ahead and talk in our next video about link states and then probably variables too, CSS variables, and then we'll be pretty close to being done.